Angelinos and lovers of justice and freedom. This is our regularly scheduled meeting of the Homeless and Poverty Committee of the Los Angeles City Council. My name is Marquise Harris Dawson. I'm the chairperson of the committee. We're joined by our vice chair, Councilmember Jose Huizar, and Councilmember Mike Bonin. We'll begin the meeting with those of you who have submitted multiple cards over multiple issues. You will have 2 minutes to divide amongst the issues that you have submitted cards on, and then 1 minute for general public comment. The first one is for Peppa Pig. The second one is for NWA, I guess. And the third one is for Antonio Ramirez. You can all be seated at the table, and your time will begin with you. Gentleman with the puppet.
What?
Yes, he's referring to you, dummy.
Okay, very good. I might be a puppet, but I have more substance than you, puppet. Yes. So, project labor agreements for HHH bonds. We're here to bitch about the way the HHH is being handled. We're not getting the money out there fast enough. Fly a helicopter over Skid Row and dump the fucking money from the helicopter. Give the money to the homeless in cash. What the fuck is the problem? We do not need you. We do not need intermediaries. Dump the money cash out of a helicopter tonight on Skid Row so we all can catch the fucking bags of money. That's what we need. Bitches and money, that's what we need. That's what NWA said. Another speaker is NWA, yes. We do not need non-profits, promises, broken promises. We need the cash now. Give us the money, bitches, yes. So, point-in time homeless count, 100,000 homeless in downtown alone. You can count, go down to Wall Street at 8 and walk those wonderful streets with all those fucking tents. What is this, urban camping? Is it a commercial for REI? No, it's a homeless crisis. And then, of course, we're just joined by the Corinne Price, yes. 2 wives and no solutions, yes, we know the drama. The drama of CD9 and Wall Street and homelessness. Give the people the fucking money, yes.
That concludes your time for this meeting, Mr. Spindler. Thank you so much.
1 minute to general. 1 minute to general, bitch. Yes, okay. So now...
Please have it go.
Yes, okay. We understand the gentleman doesn't wear a jacket. Okay, so now we're all here for one thing, everybody. The fucking money. Yes, we want the money. Start giving the money in plastic bags. We want the money. Spread the booty. Give us the dinero. Give us the shekels. We're here for the money. Don't be afraid, everybody. Let's just run up here and make a line and get the bag of money. 250,000 for me, 100,000 for Mr. Herman, 100,000 for Antonia, and even $50,000 for our good friend Jose Huizar to help pay that settlement you fuckers made him out of his pocket settle. We're mad about that. No city councilman should ever pay a dime out of their pocket. Pay the fucking bills for the fuck-ups. Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you so much.
That was a good one.
Bitch. Measure HHH. Such phony bonds and such a process of nonsense. How many times have the homeless been taken advantage of? Well, you calculate it. Look around on the streets. And does HHH and Measure H apply to anything? Yeah, it applies to one fucking thing. A bunch of fucking loser politicians who can't manage money. And yeah, you should fly a helicopter with Hugo Rossiter. to give all the money back that you stole from those people that you call indigenous homeless people. Not that they're all homeless, but there are a few veterans out there with their children living in the streets and the gutters thanks to the Homeless Committee. In addition to that, regarding homeless service and point of time of homeless count, fuck your count. Look around on the streets, at the curbs. And best of all, look at City Hall East, where that fucking white Jew, what's his name? I forget. I think it's El Jefe Fior, has allowed homeless people to sleep at his doorstep like we're little animals. Woof, woof. Or pets, right? Meow. But those are human beings, and that's how you treat them. And then regarding Harrison Dawson and we saw relative a reappointment of Ms. Blair, no, I say no. You should put Francine Godoy on this committee for reappointment because we paid her $185,000 for a sexual harassment case. And I think Hugo Rossiter should have paid her triple that amount because it was one good fuck.
Interesting.
You're off topic.
Now, based on my general public comment of 1 minute, I'd like to remind you that the other day when I was making this flag salute or whatever, this unconstitutional violation of my civil rights that I have to pledge allegiance, fuck you, your pledge allegiance. I hold the sovereignty of the Brown Act in California. I waive my rights not to address and salute any white niggers who allow me to be homeless since 2008.
Flag salutes are not a part of our jurisdiction.
And the issue of this complaint is that I had to go to the doctor and file a stress and anxiety attack that white nigger, Herman Jason Weston Jr., put on my burden of mental health, that son of a bitch, what's his name? That Jew, Bloomfield. Yeah, that Jew Bloomfield said, oh, look at the mental health these people do. We have to deal with these people with mental health. Well, you know what, asshole? Pay up and HHH, bitch, bitch, bitch.
It's your time.
That's what I thought.
Concludes your time for this meeting. Ms. Ramirez.
Thank you. Number one, let us hire military veterans, those who are homeless and impoverished. Stop hiring these goddamn wetbacks and gangbangers. They are not professional. They have no manners. And number two, La Raza is a fraudulent, corrupted, and abusive Ponzi scheme organization that has broken federal law by not using housing funds for their legally intended purposes. Furthermore, La Raza needs to be shut down and all official crooks fired, because as we all know, the goddamn employees and higher management and they hire wetbacks and gangbangers who have gang ties directly or indirectly to the street gangs. So they all house and hire illegal gangbangers and wetbacks from La Familia, i.e. Frank, a prison felon, is employed by the Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority, and he contracts with the wicked, decrepit, corrupted, pathological liar, and inconsiderate, bogus, hypocritical Pastor Chuwang, Grace Pam, and Florence Akuche, all Nigerian black assholes who operate the LA Faith Chapel Samaritan Home made by Ocean Properties.
I think you're off topic, Ms. Ramirez.
No, I'm not off topic. I'm actually talking about the homeless issue, and it's La Raza. Again, La Raza hires prison felons, Latino gangbangers who house their homies in all the transitional housings throughout Los Angeles. So no, I'm not off topic. And who does this crook, this prison asshole? Frank, he's in cahoots with Chuwang Pam, the Nigerian crook asshole who runs these organizations to shelter these so-called homeless people. And what they do is they kick them out. They kick them out of the homes, and then they make money, and they do not return the money that belongs to these homeless people when they kick them out. So they're triple dipping. They bring them in from Skid Row, kick them out, and they don't return their money, and they bring in more in a shared housing.
That's your time. Thank you. Please do not disrupt the meeting. Please do not disrupt the meeting.
Urusai. Thank you very much. I told him to shut up in Japanese. Public comments. Stop the homeless racketeering by Los Angeles Housing, SASA. These bogus, hypocritical, malicious, and pathological liar pastors Chu Wong and Grace Pam and Florence Akuche, who are black Nigerian assholes. They have 5 ocean properties, duplex homes, in a shared transitional homes out in South Central Los Angeles. They are running an illegal housing operation, stealing money from the homeless. These black Nigerians and bogus Christian assholes are located at the LA Faith Chapel Samaritan Home, located at 10216 South Denker Avenue, LA, California 90047. They steal money from the homeless individuals by kicking them out and not refunding their money. And using these federally grants, monies and stolen money to fly back to Nigeria and fight the Muslims. Thank you.
That concludes the multiple speaker cards for this meeting. Welcome to Los Angeles City Council, everyone. Who's not accustomed. We have one more general comment card for someone named Isabella Sheely.
Hi, I'm a research fellow at CAST, Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Human Trafficking. We service survivors of human trafficking in Los Angeles County, and I just wanted to encourage consideration of this population because because there's a lot of intersections in terms of homelessness, both from homeless people having higher rates of becoming trafficked, and then also as soon as we identify someone as being trafficked, their next step is into homelessness. And so we just encourage you to keep this population in mind in your proceedings. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Mr. Clerk,
Sir.
Can we begin our regular business at this time?
Certainly, sir. And as I understand, you would like to start with item number 4?
Yes.
Item number 4 is a motion by Council Members Harris Dawson and Council President Wesson relative to the reappointment of Ms. Blair Beston to the Citizens Oversight Committee of Proposition HHH pursuant to Admin Code 8.237 for a full year term ending June 30, 2020.
Thank you. So I have 3 speaker cards on this matter. One from someone named Craig R., good friend Steve Diaz, and Mr. Caparella.
Good afternoon. When LA Can, Craig R., LA Can, when LA Can fought for and helped pass both H and Triple H, we did so knowing that it would provide much-needed resources to aid in the fight to end homelessness in LA. We also knew that in order to make the implementation happen in the interest of a majority of Angelenos and not in the interest of developers, we would have to fight to ensure that our voices were represented in any advisory board or commission that was established, like the Oversight Commission. Do I have only 1 minute?
Yeah.
Today that fight is more pressing than ever. City Hall has stacked the 7-member HHH Citizen Oversight Committee with real estate developers, political insiders, a gentrification icon, a public-private partnership intermediary, and a student. To add insult to injury, there is an effort to extend Blair Beston. We would ask that you would postpone or deny her extension on the HHH committee until you speak with us. And we have here some newspaper articles which are our LA Can's housing preservation activities in the past, and we'd like you to look them over.
Thank you. Mr. Caparella.
All right. Danny, LA Can. Insanity is defined as doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. The general public, based on story after story and op-ed after op-ed, is not convinced that you have any idea how to end homelessness. Homeowners voted to tax themselves with HHH, low-income voters supported a regressive tax in H, yet developers are willing to pay nothing. Every story is laced with how much control developers and deep-pocket interests have over elected officials. There is even a Fair Political Practice Commission investigation into those practices. But still we're amazed at how you keep getting it wrong, wondering if in fact getting it wrong is the only way You can stay on the right side or in the pockets of those with the resources to keep you in those chairs. What else can explain your feet dragging on moving forward a linkage fee that can contribute greatly to building housing affordable to us? There is no shortage of cranes dotting the downtown skyline. Businesses
Mr. Caparello, this is on the appointment of Ms. Blair Beston.
Yes. I can gets to that. Business is clearly good in the market rate housing world, and commercial development is not that shabby either. What else can explain extending Blair Beston's term on the HHH committee? Please postpone or deny its extension. Los Angeles deserves better, and there are a number of qualified candidates ready and willing to occupy this seat.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Steve Diaz. I'm also here with LA CAN. We're here today against the proposed reappointment of Blair Benstein to the Triple H Oversight Committee. Her record has shown that she is not a homeless-friendly person, but her qualifications have also shown that. Everything from being the head of a business improvement district that has been documented on numerous studies as supporting anti-homelessness, to her former position with the Maryland Corporation, who helped displace hundreds of people from the Alexandria Hotel and the Frontier Hotel. Her record speaks for itself. We ask that you delay this vote we ask that you delay this vote and/or reappoint someone directly from LA CAN's membership base. This is a great opportunity to increase the capacity of a committee that was clearly passed by voters who were stressing the urge to the council that we need to end homelessness. We ask that you not reappoint her and that you really base that non-reappointment on her qualifications. Thank you.
Thank you. I think if there are no questions or comments from committee members, we'll approve this item on consent. Excellent. That'll be the order. Mr. Clerk, next item.
Sir, we'll proceed with item number 3, right, sir?
Yes.
Item number 3 is Department of City Planning and Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority reports and CAO and CLA joint reports relative to the framework and implementation for the Safe Parking Pilot Program.
Hold on.
All right, we'll do item number 1.
The clerk and I have our wires crossed a little bit. There we go. All right, one more time, Mr. Clerk.
One more time.
Next.
Item number 1 is a verbal discussion relative to the citywide project labor agreements for projects funded with Proposition HHH bond proceeds, including provisions for local hire and employing transitional disadvantaged workers who are residents of the city.
Excellent. So we have 3 speakers to talk to us about the project labor agreement and some of the questions that we had from our joint Housing and Homelessness and Poverty Committee a few weeks back. I'd like to call up John Reamer from the Bureau of Contract Administration, Mr. Ron Miller from Building Trades Council, and Ms. Becky Dennison from Venice Community Housing. So I guess I'll begin with you, Mr. Reamer. Could you kind of give us an overview for where we are with regard to developing a project labor agreement? And then after you can hear from a housing provider and representative from labor, and then some questions from us.
Most certainly. Good afternoon, council members. John Reamer, the Director of the Bureau of Contract Administration. To give some brief history with respect to the project labor agreement, the Department of Public Works has been involved with project labor agreements since roughly year 2000. The first one was on our East Central Interceptor Sewer project. We've used these agreements to ensure that our projects were delivered in a timely manner, but they also provided for quality construction and created a pathway for individuals, men and women in this city, to gain access to viable careers. Many refer to the project labor agreement as just that, the PLA, but we've renamed it because it focuses on what we, the city family, believe and stand for, which is a partnership. Project labor agreements are a partnership between the city, the contractors, the community, and the crafts. All 4 have a voice, and I know there's been some concern with respect to Measure HHH and the council's desire to consider a project labor agreement as to whether or not all parties will have a voice. And they do. We make it an effort to reach out to and have dialogue with all interested parties because we want policy that's going to benefit everyone. The L in the project labor agreement speaks to leverage, where all of those parties bring their expertise to the table. This cannot happen without everyone being involved. The crafts bring their training, and they do an excellent job in training men and women to work in this career path, this construction industry. The city family, they bring the opportunity through the contracts and the job opportunities. And then the community, they bring those workers that have a desire to work and to learn and to contribute. And that's where the A comes in. The A is accountability. It's not just an empty agreement where we put something on the table and say, go out and hire people that live in the city. That's not the case at all. We want to make sure that this is a legitimate career path, one that affords opportunities for men and women who want to change their lives. So we focus on 3 areas of measurement. One is the local component, which you've asked for in the motion to consider in a project labor agreement, which we have in ours. We typically use 30% as a measurement tool, 30% of hours worked on projects. And over the last 3 months, in our project labor agreements, we've been averaging 40% local hire. Now, the requirement is 30%. We far exceed that, and we're proud of that because we recognize that there are men and women in this city that do want to participate. There's also a focus on local apprentices. State already requires that when public monies are used, there is an apprenticeship participation number of roughly 20%. We've said we want 50% of that requirement to be apprentices from the LA area. Over the past 3 months, we've been bringing in roughly 60% of the hours worked by local apprentices. Again, proud of that. And then the third element that we measure with respect to our accountability is opportunities for those who want a second chance, or re-entry, if you will. We at one time called them at-risk individuals. We changed that name because we didn't like how it fit to disadvantaged, and we've later changed it to what it really speaks to, transitional workers. And that would be a veteran, it would be a homeless individual, it would be someone who is seeking reentry, maybe they are an ex-offender, and there are other criteria that are used. A single parent, someone that did not graduate from high school, persons that are living far below the poverty line. We have these areas that we reach out to provide them opportunities. 10% is the goal. We're roughly at 19%. So these agreements do work. In the Department of Public Works, we had we're into our second one, 5-year agreements. That, again, I argue are very successful. From that, the Port of Los Angeles has an agreement also that they're in the process of finalizing. Los Angeles World Airports, they have an agreement that has been around for some time. Metro, the agency, has an agreement that we helped them put in place. Many of these agreements mirror the same approach with respect to hours worked and opportunities for the constituents that live in identified zip codes based on poverty levels. So again, the partnership is key, leveraging the expertise is key, and then holding everybody accountable is key. I know the community has been concerned, and some developers have been concerned that they may not get the workers, the quality of workers, and Mr. Miller is here to speak to that, but in our agreement, there is a window of opportunity. When that contractor or that developer makes a request, because the trades are identified as the referral agent of record, when they make that request, the trades have roughly 48 hours to respond to that. And if they can't respond to that, then that developer is allowed to go and hire someone from other means that they have been able to find. And that, again, that's where the community comes in hand. But we don't see a lot of that because, again, this is an active agreement where the partnership is very important to all of us. And so we push each other to make sure that our numbers do reflect what I've shared with you today.
Excellent, thank you. Ms. Dennison?
Hi, everybody. I'm Becky Dennison with Venice Community Housing, and I'm here representing the larger permanent supportive housing development community, as well as folks who live in our buildings and folks who are living on our streets. We are obviously very excited about the implementation of HHH, but we also view it as a real responsibility to deliver and to build our capacity and be able to triple production. And so we really support the PLA policy, though it does raise some concerns for us to be sure that it is manageable and meets the specific needs of permanent supportive housing development, which is really very unique in comparison to the PLA policies that have been applied previously. So we have very limited experience under the CRA's Construction Careers Program. There were a couple of permanent supportive housing projects that operated, and so we're sort of building from there and really making sure that this can add to the public value of HHH in adding the good jobs component, but also in a way that we can manage it and doesn't slow our startup and certainly doesn't impact negatively our projects. So we have three really core points, and one is the threshold on the size of project, and we are recommending 75 units of permanent supportive housing be the threshold for application. And that is really just from a financial standpoint. We have to have projects that are big enough and budgets that are big enough to absorb the additional cost, the additional administration, and those kinds of things that come with the program. And I think that it's important to know that HHH is now designed to be used with the 4% bond program instead of the 9% tax credit. So that brings our financing down lower than it was before. So it gives us even almost less margin to work with, and that's what we've been planning for. So that's why we really need to talk about sort of how does that impact what we've been projecting and what we've been planning. We do definitely want to ensure some safety valves in the policy. If we can't, we take folks absolutely at their word that they'll deliver workers, they'll deliver bids. But if for some reason they don't, in a really boom construction period, we're already having a hard time getting enough bids on our projects that are small, generally in comparison to what folks are looking for. And so if they can't, and if we can't do that, we definitely need those safety valves to have other options. And again, I know there's some concern about that. That's really an issue of primarily of our tight timeframes that the tax credit program requires. We can't have any unexpected delays, and if we don't meet those timeframes, there are serious penalties. And so again, taking away from the capacity of development of this type of housing. The last major piece is just the threshold date for implementation. So making sure that when we pass the policy, that projects that are already so far along in their financing process and can't absorb any changes at that time, sort of get grandfathered in, that there's a date that makes sense for our planning in terms of implementation. There's two smaller pieces, I think. We would actually like to make sure that evaluation is built in some way so that we can make adjustments as we go. We suggested potentially an initial term of 1 to 2 years so that we could evaluate at that time, but there might be other evaluation tools that could be used along the way to make sure that we can problem solve. And the last piece is around jobs coordination and just having a much better understanding of how that will work. We can't do the local hire piece and those kinds of things without a jobs coordinator, and it's just not entirely clear sort of how that will be financed, who's obligated to carry that piece. But we know that's an important part of the model, and we want to talk more about that. So we agree with Mr. Reamer. I think the city is well positioned to help figure out how this can work, and the conversations have started, and we're really looking forward to digging into those details and coming back to you all fairly quickly with something that we think, again, meets both policy goals to advance HHA's housing goals quickly and efficiently and at scale, as well as incorporate good jobs and union trades. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. So from Executive Director to Executive Secretary of Southern California Building Trades.
I don't type all that fast either. Good afternoon. I'm Ron Miller with the LA Orange County Building Trades. And Mr. Reamer's right. We're in a hell of a partnership. We've got a lot of work. We've done a lot of work. Just a little history on the building trades. We've had agreements with LAUSD since 1999. Councilman Huizar was very important in implementing that agreement and nurturing it along to make it very successful. We've did $20 billion worth of work under that agreement, built 130 new schools. We have a 50% local hire rate right now on all those projects, and it continues today with about $7 billion left to spend on modernization. They extended their agreement for 10 years. The agreement down at the Port of Los Angeles, it's going to be going up for a vote in the next month or so. It's also a 10-year extension. These entities wouldn't be extending it if they weren't viable and they worked. So these are great partnerships, very successful at putting men and women from the community to work. Just a side note, we did a little poll at the end of the year. I checked with all the trades in LA and Orange County. At the end of 2011, we had 4,000 apprentices in our program. At the end of 2016, we had over 10,000. So we are growing, and it continues to grow right now. We have a curriculum called the MC3 curriculum that we've implemented around the county. We have partners such as the Flint Ridge Center, LA Trade Tech, Youth Build USA. We also partner with a group called ARC, Anti-Recidivism Coalition, with a guy named Scott Budnick. We've been very successful at taking men that are getting discharged from Men's Central Jail, putting them into a 120-hour boot camp, and placing them in careers in the apprenticeship. So we're definitely partnering with the community to put men and women to work, and I didn't even mention the $120 billion worth of transportation work with the MTA and all the work associated with the airport. Those are all the men and women of the building trades, and that allows us to take in apprentices and create these partnerships for pre-apprenticeship. We spend on our own, the building trades in partnership with our contractors, we spend $200 million a year in the state of California training apprentices. So if it's hard to get men and women on construction sites, things are tight right now. We're very busy, but we still are training. We're still growing our apprenticeship, and there's still folks left at the Union Hall waiting to go to work. And it's actually, as you know, that's the thing about construction. You work yourself out of a job, you go back to the Union Hall, and another contractor calls for the next job. So we make a career out of what some people call temporary jobs. That's the way we do it. And for the non-union that don't have hiring halls, I don't really know where they are very successful at getting their manpower when they really need to ramp up for the construction boom. It's not only for public sector entities. We have the recently finished Wilshire Grand Hotel. We had over 1,100 men and women on that project to build it. The USC Village, that was just completed. We had a like amount of folks on that project. We're in the process of building the Rams Stadium in Inglewood. That's projected to have 3,000 folks on that job by July sometime. The soccer stadium over at the old sports arena is being built by under an agreement with local hire. All these agreements have local hire. The threshold was mentioned. We think that a threshold of 50 to 60 would be more applicable. If we're going to work within the community and pull folks out of the community and put them into a career, we'd like to see them finish their apprenticeship within this work. And the list of projects, normally, if you pick 75, it wouldn't amount to very many projects in our eyes. At 50 or 60, it would be like 50% of the projects. We don't think that's an overreach. We think that that's stuff that's very doable. And as far as the contractors, it's open to non-union and union contractors. So we're not taking away from anything that is going on now. We're going to be actually adding to the contractor pool. When our contractors see that there's an agreement, they know that it kind of levels the playing field, and they will come in and bid the work. So as far as the safety valve, we don't see a problem getting men and women to work on the projects for the contractors. We don't get involved in the contracting process, and we don't tell the developer who to pick for contractors. That's left up to their bidding processes. And I can tell you these agreements work under all different delivery methods, whether it's lowest bid, responsible bid, lease back, or whatever the bidding process is or the delivery model is. These projects work. And as far as these projects, using the HHH money, it makes them prevailing wage. So I come from the Plumbers Union. I got 39 years in the Plumbers Union, and prevailing wage is the same if it's a job that builds 10 units, 20 units, or 150 units. That plumber on the job makes the same wage. So this agreement deals strictly with labor. So there really shouldn't be a consideration for labor if the job is a lower unit or a higher unit. The labor rate is the same for the project. So as far as implementation, their budget should be the same. They budget out the jobs. They plan on having, 6 plumbers on the job or 3 electricians or whatever. It doesn't change. The wages are the same. So we do have review committees set up in the project labor agreements. All of them have what they call a joint administrative committee, so that when there is problems or perceived problems or issues, we convene a like number of labor folks and a like number of management folks, get them in a room, and that's how we get things done, get in the room and talk about them and figure out a way to make things better. So there are review processes and ways to massage the project agreement as it goes along.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Miller. So I know this is a point of lots of conversation in our last discussion, so members, now is our time to put questions forward. I'll begin with you, Mr. Price, and we'll work our way across. I'm sorry, Mr. Miller, you have one more thing?
In the packets I handed out, there's a study that was done on the CRA, and basically it studied the difference between projects that were done under PLA and projects that were not done under PLA. And I did bring a guy that works for the AFL-CIO Housing Investment Trust today. He does projects all over the United States, is involved in them and funding process. If you'd like to have him come up and speak, he's more than willing. But the study does say basically that there's no cost difference between a project with a PLA or without a PLA.
So, thank you. Mr. Price?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the panelists for their comments. This is something that has generated lots of interest. It's important that we create these projects and that we create opportunities along with the projects. So we appreciate the PLA and the effort, the collaborative effort between labor and contractor and city government making that happen. There was a comment made that 60%, I guess the comment was, I think you may have made, Mr. Reamer, about the local hire, and I think the comment was that 60% of the projects, or projects that achieve 60% local hire. My question was, what are we calling local hire? That 5 miles, 1 mile, 10 miles, 20 miles out? That frequently is a point of contention. You may want to comment on that, and also.
For the John Reamer, the Department of Public Works PLA, we don't utilize radius. Rather, we focus on zip codes based on household income and unemployment. Those are the two criteria that we use to determine.
That's a little more precise way of getting at that populations in need?
Yes, yes. So the number that, what happens is that because we are the state's certified labor compliance officer for the city, we receive all certified payrolls. That gives us the information that we need to determine where that individual lives, the classification they're working in, and how much they're being compensated. And then, whether or not they're an apprentice or journey level worker. The 60% was for the apprentices, local apprentices, inside of the LA area. There are agreements that focus on using the radius based on the center point of the project, which is an approach. USC used that approach.
Right.
And it would be a negotiable item with respect to how far out that would extend. Would you want it to stay within the confines of the city boundary? It could go either way. The reason that we chose not to do that with the Public Works Project Labor Agreement is because we had projects all over the city, and again, it afforded all of the council members to have constituents work on the projects.
Mm-hmm. And so what do you attribute the success to then? Extraordinary outreach or willingness of the developers to work with this, or
Quite honestly, I attribute the success to a mayor and a council who have made it very clear that they want job opportunities for the constituency, to a board and public works that we report to quarterly and are giving attention to this. I mean, this will not happen by itself. It just will not. It takes everyone keeping their hand involved in the process. As Mr. Miller alluded to, there are times when we will need to have meetings to get clarity as to what and how. You will have some contractors that they have not worked under a project labor agreement before. That does not mean they cannot be successful. We have those that are successful. We have those that have worked under them before, and we don't necessarily have the success right away. It's the desire. It's the desire. And I have not heard yet from any of the members that there is not a desire to do that. I did not hear that from the community at the table. You're not hearing that from the trade, certainly not from the city. But it's us all working together, identifying and appreciating the concerns that exist. As we heard today, the concerns are a delay. There cannot be a delay because of the risk that would be involved. The trades are hearing that, and that would be addressed in the negotiations when we come up with an agreement. We have to report back to committee with respect to what we have found. We already have, I believe, a meeting scheduled with representatives of the housing development community to hear concerns so that we can provide you what I'm imagining a range for you to give direction to the city attorney as it relates to what type of an agreement you want penned. So we're using, as the motion said, the existing agreements that we have in place, be it the public works or the port, the airport. They all are unique because they have different things that they have to face. The port, for an example, they have a state tidelines agreement. So that's something that's taken into consideration. So having a radius is not something that we would have a problem with. If that's the desire, we can certainly do that.
Some suggest that the penalties aren't sharp enough, that they don't have enough teeth into forcing or encouraging or cajoling compliance. Any thoughts about that?
The Public Works PLA does have penalties, but we also have a safe harbor. And if the contractor utilizes the services of a jobs coordinator, they don't have to. That choice is totally up to them. Some contractors believe that they understand the process. They have a good feel for the community. They have the relationships. They can go find individuals when they need to. I mean, there are three words that we really push for, and that's why we have a 5-year agreement. It's the recruitment of individuals that come into an apprenticeship program. And that, because public monies are being utilized, is going to be necessary whether there's a project labor agreement or not. Then the retention, making sure that these apprentices stay in the program. Mm-hmm. That does not happen if there's not work. And right now there's a lot of work in the region, so that helps. And then graduation. We want them to graduate. We want them to become journey-level workers. That's the task here. A homeless individual, a veteran who is now transitioning into another career, someone who is looking for a second chance because they're an ex-offender and they can't get a job someplace else. I think we all want to be able to see them come in, do their time, 5 to 6 years, depending on the craft, and then become a journey-level worker. So why we have the penalties is to make sure that everyone understands this is serious. We take this seriously.
Well, as important as the work, we have to be able to track it. We have to hold some accountability. And,
we do.
Are you satisfied with the tools you have to measure, to keep track, to hold all parties accountable?
Well, if that's a budget and finance question, no, I'm not satisfied. No, I believe that we have a process in place that is effective, and we're working to make it better because we see that this clearly is not just a desire but a need. And we can give you more information on where we are. We made the transition some time ago from a hand process to an electronic process of receiving certified payrolls. That definitely made it easier. And as we speak today, we're in the process of trying to modify and augment that so that it's even more robust. So we're doing pretty good, but we can do better.
Well, again, thanks for your efforts. PLAs are an important tool in the effort to achieve the kind of community development, economic development that we want to see, and making sure that everyone is able to take advantage and rise with with the boats as they're going up. So, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Mr. Bonin?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm obviously supportive of this. I think it's a great idea, and I'm glad to see it. I did want to follow up with Becky and Ron a little bit, and John, feel free to chime in if you have thoughts that are relevant on a couple of the points that Becky made and that Ron chimed back in on. Because as I said, I'm very supportive of this. I'm also acutely aware of how difficult it is to make anything pencil out in my district, and I think it's as important for Mr. Weezar as it is for me that we have permanent supportive housing around the city and not just concentrated in downtown or in certain council districts. I want to get a little bit clarity. Becky mentioned that the recommended sort of threshold or the recommended minimum number of units should be 75. And why was that again? What was the concern that made a lower number too difficult and 75 was the sweet spot for you?
Well, we're not entirely sure 75 is the sweet spot. I would say amongst our development community, people would say it should be higher. But it is a tested threshold that the CRA used. And it is, we don't get really to the sort of what people call the sweet spot of getting economies of scale until we get to 60 units. So we can't absorb costs at the bottom. So we feel like it's a little bit higher into the range of where we can start to absorb costs and get economies of scale. And it's a tested model from the CRA that people operated under, and it worked.
And Ron, for you, that was too high. Did I hear you correctly in saying that 50 or 60 was okay?
Looking at the list of projects that we're looking at, we would like to, I'd like to capture as many as I could, but 50 or 60 is we think are good. We recently renegotiated the MTA agreement, and it does have a component in there for transit-oriented communities around the stations, and 60 is the number we used. The young lady that I negotiated with used to work for the CRA, and she did a lot of checking, a lot of talking with contractors, and
was that Jenny?
The number that we negotiated with.
Was that Jenny Scanlon?
Hornbeck.
Oh, yes.
But I'll just say that transit-oriented communities is not the same as developing permanent supportive housing. That might be affordable or mixed income housing, and so the margins are different. Yeah.
Okay. And did I hear you correctly, Ron, when you said 75 would capture, would be so high that it would capture 50% of the projects?
I don't think it would capture 50%.
Okay. Any sense of, because there's I guess there's two sort of ways to count. There's a number of projects it would impact, then there's a number of jobs it would impact, and those would be two separate things. So as we go forward, I'll be curious to see that. Obviously, we're not making any decisions about this today. We're telling city attorney presumably to.
What I look at is we have these pre-apprenticeship training centers, and to have the commitment for the trades to have the partnership with those and train people from the community to get into our trades. We want to have a robust program so that the trades feel comfortable taking in those folks that we're going to have jobs for them in the future.
Yep. So Becky talked about the need for safety valves. I thought I understood your comments to be that you were confident there wouldn't be a need for safety valves because there'll be a sufficient pipeline there. If you're confident that there won't be a need for one, is there a problem with having one built in just in case?
For manpower, Mr. Reamer alluded to the fact that there is a safety valve in there for manpower that if the union can't supply the manpower within a certain amount of hours, the contractor's free to go get his manpower anywhere he wants.
Okay.
And we're asking for an additional one if we can't get three competitive bids in a short period of time. We think that there may be an impact on the folks who usually bid our jobs that aren't used to operating under project labor agreements, and that they might not bid. So we're already at a shortage of bids in this environment. And so again, if we're wrong, we're wrong. And that's fine. But we're worried. It's an uncertainty we're not comfortable with.
Okay. Anything else you want to add on that?
So we've done billions and billions of dollars worth of these agreements, and usually the pool of bidders increase. And I understand that it's not supportive housing, but those folks that are doing supportive housing, they're doing other projects too. So they're not just doing, that plumbing contractor is not just doing supportive housing, he's doing other types of projects also.
And on the question of the threshold date for implementation, I didn't think I heard you say anything on that.
If the project hasn't been bid yet, if a contractor hasn't given a number for it, then, they usually put these documents in the bid specifications so that the contractor knows he's going to be bidding under these conditions. Then if it hasn't went to bid, then it should be included.
I don't think I can answer that specifically. I will say that might be okay, but our position is that if there's any public funding commitment, then the budget has sort of been set. So that's our initial thought on that.
Okay. That's something I'm going to want to dig into a little bit more and get, because I get sort of lost in the weeds very quickly when you guys start doing your sort of acronyms and 9% and 4% and...
So the projects are done under prevailing wage, and you can have that conversation with Mr. Reamer, since he works for you, and he can explain the prevailing wage to you.
Okay, well, I look forward to having some time with you, John, on that one.
And we can more clearly put forward our suggested threshold and whether it differs or not.
Right. And I guess my final question is because my understanding is we're going to instruct that the ordinance be drafted, it'll come back, you'll have comments on it, you'll have comments on it, everybody will have some comments on it. City attorney usually does a pretty good job of coming up with a decent draft. Sometimes they give us an A and a B on certain things. What experience is there in other cities or other jurisdictions in doing PSH with PLAs, and is there anything we can learn from that experience at all? Do you know, John?
It's going to be the market. It's that environment. Cities are going to be unique with respect to how big the catchment area is going to be. That will have a lot to do with the ability to draw upon certain levels of talent. We've been fortunate. LA is a big footprint. That's one of the reasons, again, I hesitated on wanting to necessarily recommend a radius. I get individual communities might like that, but the city as a whole, they all benefit because projects are going to move all over the place.
Does anybody know offhand if there are other jurisdictions that have a PLA requirement for PSH?
I brought Ted Chandler with me. He's with the AFL-CIO Housing Investment Trust. So he does projects all over the country, and he may be able to speak to that.
Don't need a long answer. Just, if it's Chicago, Boston, and San Francisco, that's sort of all I want.
Sure. We've financed permanent supportive housing not only here in Los Angeles, the Moja development on South Main Street, 30 units there, but recently completed one in Denver, the Renaissance Lofts in Denver, Imperial Hotel in Atlanta, and a Bissonette houses in Boston. So,
I wasn't asking so much about specific projects, but other jurisdictions that have a PLA requirement for PSH.
I think Ellen knows, or Meg.
I think that across the public housing authorities frequently are the financiers of permanent supportive housing. Cities from Seattle, San Francisco, New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, as well as even smaller communities. We've done them in Joliet, Illinois, have implemented these agreements very similar to the PLA agreement where we finance the developments under those.
Okay. I was more curious about a jurisdictional requirement, but if anybody knows of any, please let me know, because I'd just like to look at their model.
Well, they're requirements of those housing authorities.
Of those housing authorities. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. I think we had some additional light on this matter.
Sure. My name is Alan Greenlee. I'm the Executive Director of the Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing. There are no other jurisdictions where permanent supportive housing is blanket subject to a project labor agreement. There are individual deals where project labor agreements have been engaged in, but there are no jurisdictions that have LA's in the front on this.
Okay. Well, that's never a bad thing. We do that a lot.
And we're the only jurisdiction with a specified source of revenue for permanent supportive housing. Only.
I think that's correct.
Got it. All right.
Other than the housing authorities which support it and provide the financing.
Just irrespective of whatever details we come out with, do you guys think we're on the right path to come up with something and come back? Do you need more? I mean, I assume we're going to give some direction, but just want to know if there's any additional direction our city staff needs to make sure we come up with something that makes sense. And at this point,
No, you've pointed us in the right direction. We've had 2 discussions with you. We're clear on what we need to bring back in our report. We have the meetings planned, and so we're going in the right direction.
okay, thank you. I just want to make sure there's a process in place to come up with something that makes sense at some point. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, members, and thank you so much to the panel. Hold on. The chair has questions. The chair has questions. Appreciate my colleagues because they've asked a lot of what we are trying to figure out. I need my staff to do a little math for me to help me out because I can't add and talk at the same time. But that's it, Mr. Spindler. One more time. On the local hire question, I guess I have 2 questions. One is because we're doing permanent supportive housing, I know and I've been a part of making sure we have programs for people returning home from incarceration and folks who are disadvantaged workers. I'm wondering if there are any projects specific that any of you know about that can help people move from homelessness into these kinds of jobs. I think it's appropriate to look at that population. Then I think what is a tougher question, and I think it's mainly you, Mr. Reamer, but also Mr. Miller, and I know Ms. Dennison travels through District 8, so she will know what I'm talking about. There are project labor agreements, and you get a variety of reports on how well they're happening or not. But there's something in the community that we refer to as the drive-by test. So there's a construction site. I drive by it every day on the way to work, and it doesn't look like anybody from my neighborhood is working there. Mm-hmm. It looks like everybody is coming from a really long way away. Sure. And I may look on paper and go, and they may say, oh, this is 50% local hire, right? Mr. Bonin will appreciate they're building a train down Crenshaw. It's a perfect example for that. Most days I go down Crenshaw. It doesn't look like a lot of people from the neighborhood. But when you ask, they say, oh, we're exceeding our local hire goals. And I'm just trying to get at how we, one, why that happens, and 2, what we can do about it. And if there are tools that we can give you to help you put things in place to help both the union and the contractors address that matter. You worship in the district, so you know what I'm talking about.
No, I can be as frank as you need me to be, and as the law will allow me to be. I mean, obviously, Proposition 209 is going to speak to what one can do when government monies are involved as it relates to job opportunities, but this is much broader than that. That's why I spoke to the partnership. Right now, Mr. Miller has alluded to the fact that they have a large number of apprentices, and his halls and many of the crafts are empty. And there is a concern on the part of the development community that how are we going to do these projects if we don't have anyone? And that's where the community comes in. That's where the recruitment piece now. This is a perfect opportunity to reach out and make sure that the projects reflect this city with respect to the workers that are on them. We have a transition taking place now, and I don't mean to philosophize, but there are many that are going to be tridding out. They're going to be retiring, and Mr. Miller is going to want to replace them. I've never heard from Mr. Miller, and he can speak for himself certainly, that he does not want brown or black or male or female workers on his projects. There needs to be a greater emphasis on reaching out, and you've clearly communicated just now that you would like to see, and I've heard that from many of the council members, workers on these projects that reflect this city. And that's something that we all have to do. That speaks to the accountability piece. Who's coming into the apprenticeship programs? And the community can have and should have a voice in that. Because again, whether we have a project labor agreement or not, you still will need apprentices on these projects, and many developers don't always understand that. There is a requirement that a percentage of hours worked are worked by apprentices. So we need to recruit apprentices anyway. The project labor agreement is going to say we can target where they come from based on the zip codes that we use. So maybe it will be radius based on the projects. But we typically chose the environments where the unemployment was high so as to address some of the concerns that you raised. It's nothing that we can put in black and white. We do have it in our preamble that speaks to the city has always practiced reaching out and giving all parties an opportunity to work. And the contractor and the trades will actively recruit in that manner. And that's something that we can continue to place in the language. We just can't make it a mandate.
You know, we had local hire in the downtown redevelopment areas from 2002 forward, and then construction careers. And this was a major concern for the community ongoing, that the local hire didn't produce local, certainly not local to downtown or Skid Row, and definitely not reaching the homeless population. So I think it is a good time with HHH to try to make that link. And I think it isn't about who people will hire or won't hire. It's whether or not folks have those connections. And I would say that the employment service providers that focus on homeless folks just aren't in this network, and that the jobs coordinators weren't super open to expanding the network. Now, that was a different time in terms of available work. But I do think there may be things we can do in contracting that would, if not require, at least highly encourage widening the pool and targeting that group of people, and I think it would be appropriate for HHH.
So our agreements do have, under the transitional worker component, it does have language in there about homelessness, disadvantaged. I come from the Plumbers Union back in 2009 when work was bad. Many of our members were homeless. They were living in a car. They were staying at shelters. I was on a dispatch desk calling for jobs. I had a member that actually was living in a shelter, and I would call there. The phone would ring, somebody would answer, and they'd go get him, put him on the phone, and I'd say, okay, I got a job for you. He said, I'll be down. And that's how we operate. We do career fairs in the communities where the work is, so that we're sure that we draw from the local community. And we work with community groups, work source centers. We have standards for our apprenticeship, but they're standards that can be obtainable. We look to the community groups and the work source centers to help break down the barriers, so that if there's a kid that needs a high school diploma or GED, community group or that facility will help them get it. If they need a tutor in math, a lot of times the local unions will cough up a tutor to help that kid get through the entry test for the local. So we work to knock down those barriers and take from the local community with where the project's at.
Excellent. Thank you all. Just a little quick, little bit of back of the envelope math we're doing on this matter of the numbers. So if the number were to be set at 75 units, which is why I think it's important, Mr. Reamer and all of you, when you were negotiating, to look at different indicators. So it would have only covered 3 of the 9 projects, so only a third of the projects, but it would have covered more than half of the units. So it would have covered 321 out of 615 units. And then jobs, it's right about there. So if we take the projected jobs from the units that were over 75, it is 700 out of 1,421. So it's right about 50%. So I think, the two of you are right in the sweet spot. Somewhere between you two is the sweet spot for the number, for what that's worth in your inquiry, Mr. Reamer. So we don't have anything further on this item. You're going to come back to us, I think, in 60 days? You're going to come back to us in 60 days with the city attorney with something that you all have crafted and you all have looked over and marked up, and we will have further consideration. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you all.
Item number 3 is City Planning and Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority reports and CEO and CLA joint reports relative to the framework and implementation for the Safe Parking Pilot Program.
All right, now.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Steve Liu with the Office of the CLA, and I'm joined by my colleagues from LASA, Kelly Bazzelli, Chris Calandrello, and a colleague from Planning, Callie Hardy. Before we get into their reports, I just wanted to provide a quick overview on the context in terms of timeline and where we're at now with their report. So the last time that this committee heard the issue with regards to safe parking was in December. And during that committee, we continued to report that instructed LASA to direct them to prepare and present final recommendations for programmatic rules and regulations for report, and since then staff has begun working. In January, LASA released an RFI, and in February, LASA closed the RFI, and they only had about one response. But that response did not qualify because it was outside the jurisdictions and the bounds of the city. Since then, in February, city staff from Department of City Planning, Department of Building and Safety, the CLA, and the CAO began discussions to explore the plausibility of owners to use their lots for overnight vehicular dwelling. In March, LASA began to do outreach with service providers and property owners with private lots to see who would be interested in operating the program. Later in March and the beginning of April, LASA began discussions with the property owners of a church in Service Planning Area 6, and SSG Hopix, a homeless service provider in that service planning area. And in April, LASA, SSG Hopix, and the church began to negotiate a contract with regards to the scope of services and the respective duties and expectations for the program. In May, LASA finalized the contract with SSG Hopix, and city staff from the Department of City Planning and Department of Building and Safety finalized a report to allow for property owners to utilize their lots for overnight vehicular dwelling under certain conditions. And now in June, at the beginning of June, LASA's safe parking program began with SSG Hopix at a private church lot in Spot 6. And from there, I'll hand it over to my colleagues from LASA to go over their report.
Hello, Kelly Bazzelli from LASA. So I'd like to talk quickly about how we developed the program, differences between our program and Santa Barbara, which I know the city looked closely at, and then also talk about the current program as it stands. So as you know, the Safe Parking Pilot Program was created in response to the strategies and the number of people that are dwelling in their cars. The most recent homeless count counted 4,754 cars, vans, campers, and RVs being used as dwelling spaces. So to develop our pilot program, LASA researched the programs in both Santa Barbara and Seattle. Some basic notes about Santa Barbara: it has more than 100 cars in 20 lots. It has a high case manager to participant ratio, and they do random check-ins with their lot monitors across all of those lots. Seattle's program is more of a vehicular outreach program that also has lots that they service. They also piloted a safe lot for RVs that they decided not to continue. So LASA did...
Santa Barbara? Excuse me, Santa Barbara
had
Seattle.
Seattle has RVs, yeah. They did a piloted RV program that they decided not to continue. So LASA did model our program after Santa Barbara's. However, there were some differences, some programmatic differences that we chose to make different than Santa Barbara, and also external differences that impacted mainly the cost of the program and why our program is more expensive than Santa Barbara's. So as Steve said, in January we released an RFI. We did not get any eligible proposals, so we sought out a program operator and a lot. The lot and provider match that we found in SPA 6 had some requirements attached to that lot. The lot owner requires on-site security at all times, and they also charge a fee to cover their maintenance and operating costs, which we thought were reasonable. The participants in this program also have access to showers and bathrooms, which we think is an important feature, but it does add to the cost. Another difference in our program than Santa Barbara, with guidance from the city attorney, LAHSA required participants to have valid driver's license, registration, and insurance. So our program offers some financial assistance for participants to meet those requirements. And finally, the main goal for our program is to reduce homelessness by moving people out of their cars and into permanent housing. Because of that goal, we prioritize case management and we focus the program's resources on that line item. So as a quick comparison, the Santa Barbara program has a staff-to-client ratio of about 1 to 50, which is higher than LAHSA's recommended 1 to 25. Santa Barbara also has access to lots that do not charge a fee and do not require on-site monitoring at all times, and only some of Santa Barbara's lots have access to restrooms. So some pretty big differences in our programs. The current program that began this month, like Steve said, is ran by SSG Hopics as the operator, and they're using a United Methodist Church in South Los Angeles. There are 4 families enrolled so far, so altogether there are 6 adults and 4 children. Before entering the program, the families were sleeping in their cars near parks or moving from street to street each day. They've chosen not to access shelter, mostly they said because of fear. So some have fears of their children being taken away, some have heard rumors of violence, and some have all of their personal belongings in their car and don't want to leave their car parked on the street. So in just 3 short weeks, the program is already making an impact. The 4 families are using the showers every day. The church is providing sack lunches, and they also have a breakfast program. And the relationship between the families and the program's case manager is developing. There's already 1 parent that has a job interview this week, so pretty quick results on that front. We also heard about a woman who came into the program interested in the program, and when she learned about other resources, she did choose to have her family access a shelter. As this is a pilot program, LAHSA will be watching it closely. We'll be meeting with them biweekly, the group, and learning from the program with hopes to find best practices for an LA program that can be scalable. Yep. Thank you. And I think planning will talk about the ordinance.
Yeah, good afternoon, Callie Hardy, Department of City Planning. So our department submitted a report that's sort of outlining the circumstances in which a property owner could make their parking lot an existing parking lot available for overnight parking for people who are dwelling in their vehicles. And as the report sort of outlines, in the vast majority of cases, there's really nothing in existing regulation that would prevent them from doing this. There are really just sort of 2 very specific and ultimately probably very rare occasions where the property might need some additional approval from the department. And there are already sort of existing processes that they could go through to get those approvals. Even looking at just the sort of very few sites that have expressed interest in participating, none of these sites that we've looked at would have had to go through any of these processes. So in the vast majority of cases, it's pretty much just already allowed by code.
Excellent. Thank you. Questions, colleagues? If there's nothing else from our illustrious panel. Mr. Price?
Well, I'm excited that...
Congratulations, District 9, stepping to the plate.
We're not going to reveal the exact address, but we know it's in SPA 6 and in South LA, and so we're excited about the experiment. I know the cost is high. Mr. Chairman, you and I had a brief conversation about this. I know that it's been a concern of others. At our rate, $77 a night in comparison to the, $7 a night, I think, in the Santa Barbara model. But I think our model is much more comprehensive: case manager, on-site security, restroom, shower facilities, financial assistance. I think it's a very comprehensive program, and I'm anxious to see that already it appears to be working. But I hope that it can really be a model that we can replicate at churches specifically all around our city that are willing to do this. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bonner?
Thank you. I've been trying to get safe parking in the city of Los Angeles for over 8 years now. And I wish I were more excited that we're at this point. First of all, thank you to the Department of City Planning for giving me the answer I've been trying to get for 8 goddamn years. 8 years trying to get that answer. Thank you so much. Thank Vince Bertoni for me. I mean, I sat with him several times. I don't know why for previous administrations this was like pulling teeth. I really don't. And I'm so grateful for Department of City Planning's opinion. Because I've had churches that have been willing to do this for like close to a decade. And they were all told by previous administrations, previous planning departments, previous city attorneys, oh, you do it, nope, not going to be legal, and you're going to get in trouble. So bless you, bless you. Congratulations, Mr. Price. Thank you for finding the location. I think it's wonderful. Certainly don't want to do anything to slow it, stop it, anything. I'm not wild about the precedent it's setting as a model, because I think it is just phenomenally expensive, and I don't know that it needs to be. I understand why that site needs to be, and hallelujah that there's a site that's working. I've had folks who are willing to do it in my district, and I've told them, don't come out and say you want to do it yet, because we haven't gotten the blessing, and I don't want you to get in trouble. Now I can tell them, I can call them tonight and say, let's talk. But I'm concerned at the cost. I think there are elements of it that I think are justifiable. I think having the different ratio for client to caseworker is great. I think that's an improvement over Santa Barbara. I think the access to showers is wonderful. I don't know that it needs to be an absolute requirement for every single place. I'm concerned, though, that we've picked as the first model a place where we have to pay rent and a place where we have to provide security. Because now that's the template for everything that comes next. So now every time there's a location in my district that is willing to do it, there's going to be someone on the church board who's going to say, well, why aren't we asking the city for money for this? When 6 months ago they were willing to do it for free. And now every neighbor is going to come up and say, they have security in Spa 6, why don't we have security here? And the lesson I got from Santa Barbara is the way they run it, you don't need security, is that the program has been essentially self-governing, that they check in periodically, that the folks who have the spots are so protective of having the spots that they fight to make sure that it's clean and successful, that some local businesses have opted in because having the program provided security. So I'm really disappointed this is our first example, because it creates barriers for the second and the third example. So my ask is that we get in contact with the ones in CD 11 and CD5 that have an interest in doing it. I'll let the churches come out of the closet themselves in my district, but there's the synagogue just outside my district in CD5 that's been chomping at the bit for a long time to get involved. And to reach out to council offices and to churches and see who's interested. This is a pilot, but you need to have various different types of pilots. Because I can't have a year from now this being the only example to point at, because we'll never do anything other than the one that costs $77 a night, when it might be possible to do maybe not $7, but a $20 a night. We have to do that. We have to do that, because it's the only way this is going to be scalable, because the cost of the one in Spa 6 isn't scalable. It's great, but it's just not scalable. So I'm offering to work with you on this. I know that there's a few folks in my district, Booker Pearson, Scott Sale, and CD5, who are eager to do the same. I would love to go to the diocese and pitch them on it. Perhaps we could go to some of the black churches and pitch them on it. We can certainly go to the synagogues and pitch them on it. I can think of a few others that might be willing to do it and see if we can get them on board to construct their own models. What's the synagogue in City 5? I can't remember the name.
It's a Leo Beck.
Leo Beck, thank you. Thank you. Leo Beck Temple, thank you very much. I don't think they have the ability to provide bathrooms, but they're willing to do it. And a lot of the vehicles have toilets. So there's different ways to do it, and I think we have to do it. So that is doable, yes?
Yes. We're excited about working with you.
Mike agrees
We
as
look
well?
forward to it. I'm Chris Calandrello, Director of Programs at LASA.
What's the status of the RFP on overall management, or the RFI? I know the first one didn't work. Feedback I've gotten from service providers is that it was overly prescriptive, and so they didn't want to respond, particularly given it's a pilot, and they'd have to build up infrastructure and then may have to lay people off. Where are we with a next generation RFI for master management? Or have we just concluded and got an agreement that the lead agencies in each spa is responsible for managing it?
So no, that's not necessarily the agreement, because there are some that have said that they wouldn't want to do it. It depends on who comes out of the woodwork. So we don't have people coming out of the woodwork, but you say you have them. So let's get them in conversation. If there's so much interest that we can't fund it all, that we can't manage it all, then we would need to do some kind of selection process, which would be a procurement.
The folks are coming out of the woodwork to provide a space, not to manage a program.
Right.
I mean, we need to have someone to manage a program.
And that's what we found was once we identified a space, we were able to better identify a operator that worked in that region, in that area. That is sort of how it fell out. We tried to do it the other way around, and it didn't really go until we had the lot.
And to add to that, I think LASA having done the RFI and having had a not usable response gives them some flexibility to, once a space is identified, do outreach to their existing providers to find somebody to match with that space without having to go through another RFI process. So it's actually more nimble where they are now.
Okay. Is there a potential provider/manager in mind for CD5? Or not CD5, for SPA 5?
SPA 5.
SPA 5, not currently.
You could,
we have had conversations.
LASA could follow the same model as this and reach out to the service providers in SPA 5 to find somebody to operate.
So the SPA 6 pilot costs how much?
$277,000 a year. I think it's also important to note that too, though, that budget would support up to 25 cars. Really, the number of cars, it's limited by the size of the lot. So if we had a lot that would accommodate 25 cars, you could actually, without any more money, serve more.
Yeah, I'm more interested in the math. How much is left?
How much? Oh, so there's $344,000 in this coming year budget for safe parking. However, there is, so 270 of that is going into the pilot for next year. But there was an additional line item that the council added into the homeless budget of $1 million for other things, like including, and safe parking is named as one of those things.
Yes.
So potentially that funding could be accessed if another site was.
Well, we have to, and we can't have another one that costs $277,000. Because best case scenario is we can do 5 with that one and the extra $1 million. And that's not enough. I mean, this isn't like the equivalent of PSH, where it's that costly. It's got to be quick and nimble.
I think one thing we'll be learning through the course of the pilot as well is how much the program actually ends up costing. So it includes enough financial assistance for the driver's license and insurance, but they may not all need that, and so could scale that back out of the budget. So part of a pilot is trying to budget as much as you think you could possibly need, but then based on how this goes, we'll have a better idea of what a program might actually need.
Well, and one of the things I'm curious about is, are we recreating the wheel in some of this? I mean, the people who are enrolled in the program and allowed to park there, okay, maybe some of them, this is their first point of contact with the continuum of care. But let me assume I find someone who's living in a vehicle in Venice. Chances are they have been contacted by LASA, by a C3 team, by St. Joe's, by somebody in the past. And if they're in the continuum of care, one of their barriers to a voucher or to placement, if they've sought it, has been the lack of an ID. So are there already agencies in that SPA whose job it is to help them get the ID? And isn't that already then accounted for and budgeted for elsewhere?
Yeah, so the service that you're talking about falls under housing navigation. Essentially, that's the title. It was newly funded last October, and it was funded at a small amount. So there's not a huge amount of this service. There is additional outreach, so especially in Venice with the C3 team, there may be other resources. But across the city, there aren't a significant amount of navigation services. As we move forward with implementation of Measure H, it's going to put 80 to 100 additional housing navigators on the street. So there are additional resources that are coming that could support additional lots and additional services of this type, but the level that's out there now doesn't account for it.
I mean, when I was pushing to get money as a member of the Budget Committee for safe parking, my thought was that what I was fighting for was the money to manage and implement the program for the service provider that runs it. I wasn't thinking that this is money that has to pay for vouchers, because we're putting money in for rapid rehousing vouchers that are available in those spas. I wasn't thinking this is money to help do the housing location of the navigation services, because we're putting money in that anyway. Just as, when we approve money for the emergency winter shelter program, or even for permanent supportive housing, we're not budgeting in that the money for the accompanying services. That's elsewhere in the budget, and it's supposed to be connected.
There are a certain level of services, and that's what we're doing with this program. It's the case management component. The housing vouchers would come through coordinated entry. That's not paid out of this budget. So these folks will have access to rapid rehousing or other housing resources as they come available in the program. The specific person to work with them to say, you need an ID, let's make that happen, didn't exist.
Right.
We're going to get more of those through Measure H, but they didn't exist when we started this. So yeah, we should be able to leverage more in the future as we go into other sites and other programs. But with this one at this time.
So a lot that opens in October when the money's flowing doesn't need some of the costs that are in place for a program that started in June.
That's what we're thinking today. Yes.
Okay. Yes. No, that's definitely what we're thinking.
I think the other thing that will be...
Hell yes is what you meant to say.
I think the other thing that will be good to learn through this pilot process too is whether there might be a different case management ratio for this population that has a car, maybe more newly homeless, and we could get some efficiencies through that also. So I think that will be something else we'll be looking to hear from LASA as it's implemented.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Price.
Thank you, Mr. Bonner. Mr. Price.
Yeah. Is there individuals have a time limit that they can stay? Is there a time period?
I believe they're expecting people. Oh, sorry. You guys can answer that.
We didn't put a time limit on it. We're expecting the services to make the difference. In Santa Barbara, folks stay for a very long time. Some of the folks have been in the parking program for a couple of years. We don't want that, but we also don't want folks to get kicked out of it either. We want them to move through and find a solution. So through this, we're going to learn what that takes, but we've funded the staffing to be able to work with those people to identify those solutions and support.
One thing that might be worth looking at is it sounds to me, based on everything you've said about Santa Barbara, that the program has changed a lot over the past few years. During its first few years, when Das Williams was still on the city council, so that's 6-7 years ago, I guess. As Mr. Bickhart from CD5 might remember, it was managed by a different agency, and I think they had a much quicker turnaround period in getting folks into housing. So something may have changed that we'll know that we want to do what they did originally. I think they had a quicker pipeline into vouchers, or maybe the first agency was better than the latter. Last question I had, and my apologies for another question. For planning, everything you said applies to privately owned stuff, yes?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What about publicly owned parking lots?
I believe the report clarifies that it would also be permitted in a public parking lot as well, just so long as it's an existing parking lot, and that individuals are sort of moving their vehicles off of the property at whatever the posted hours are.
So it would be okay in a library parking lot or in a council office parking lot, or
yes,
something like that. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Also want to join Mr. Bonin in singing the praises of planning. I think I started asking that question almost from day one of being on the council, and I make 2 years Saturday. So it's good to get an answer that if you have a parking lot, you can let people park in it. Right? It was kind of amazing how challenging that was to arrive at. So we're excited about that. I had a question about the, you specified that you didn't receive any eligible applications, and I'm just wondering what was the nature of the ineligible applications? Were there a lot of them, or were there just a handful, or
It was just one.
No.
It was outside of the city.
I was wondering, wasn't in the city? Okay,
Yeah, so
all
it's
right,
pretty-
so much for that.
Marked it off.
Because I think, Mr. Bond and I think we're going to have some creativity on this. People may not have come out the woodwork to you, but I imagine this is true for Mr. Price as well. Church leaders are always asking me, can we do a parking program at our church? They wouldn't necessarily be on the wire to know that you had an RFP out or RFI out or whatever, but there has to be a way to get to those folks, and I think separation of services is another one. I'm just curious, because when you think about SPA 6 in particular, we have areas where you might not have one parking lot, but you might have a network of 5, and you might be able to get a mobile vehicle that had bathrooms and showers in it, but each site, it wouldn't make sense to have bathrooms and showers at each site. Like, it's not really doable. So I'm just wondering what kind of flexibility we have, what type of creativity you all are thinking about. I think the same might be true for security. I do know we have neighborhoods that you would need security in the parking lots, but that you may not have to have the security only at one place. You might be able to hire a company that can do a few within a half square mile or a square mile. And I think the same thing is probably true with the caseworkers, so that your per unit cost isn't, sort of more than a hotel would be. So have you all thought about that? Have you seen examples? Are you thinking about that going forward?
If we can identify the lots, that's absolutely possible. That was the original thought, was that there would be multiple lots, a lot monitor that went around to the lots. People would access case management separately. So what you're describing was the original thought, but without the lots, we went ahead with what we could.
So what were we asking people for when we asked people, did they want to do
In the
this?
RFI?
Yes.
So the RFI went out to our service operator community mostly. That's who we were asking for proposals from. When we didn't receive any proposals, we went back and we heard that they didn't have a lot to use already, that they didn't have the other services to leverage. They were already rolling out other new programs.
So we weren't necessarily asking people who have parking lots?
But we weren't doing that.
Okay.
Not through that.
We have started to, though. We've identified other churches in South LA. One church in the Valley that's really, really interested. So we've continued to do outreach with folks. And even if they wanted to do it themselves, we would be happy to give them technical assistance and support. And
then last question for me. On this issue of the one that we're very excited about in SPA 6, and I know the folks operating it, some of the most top-notch people that we have doing work around homelessness anywhere in the city. I'm also someone who ran a nonprofit and applied for grants. It was almost never in my interest to report a savings. So I'm just wondering, and this is a program where we need them to report we need them to be able to say, like, hey, actually we didn't need this, or we found another way to do this, or once these workers hit the streets, we were able to get them involved and we didn't have to foot the bill for that. I guess, what do you all have in place to make it kind of okay for them to do that, and make it so that it's not sort of counterproductive to the building of their organization? To share with us, like, this is the way you can do this more cost effective.
I don't think so.
Because what they can't do, what you would normally do as a social service provider, you would just serve more people. The problem is they only have, this is determined by how much dirt they have, square footage they have, and so they can't they can't stack cars on top of each other, so they don't have anywhere to go.
Yeah. So we're starting with the 10. There may be additional room for an additional 5, so there is a little bit of room to go within the same budget. This took a little coercing, right? This isn't something that people came out and said, yeah, we want to do the safe parking. So the people that are doing it do want to learn from it.
Got it, okay.
And that's why we're keeping such close track. We're meeting with them bi-monthly. Our commission has asked for a monthly report on this as well. So we'll be looking at spend down, we'll be looking at service utilization, we'll be looking at the lessons learned as we go along. So there are a lot of eyes on this, including this committee. And I think it's a conversation because it's a pilot. And the partner that is in this conversation as a service provider, I think is a trusted and valuable partner in this type of endeavor. So, yeah.
Excellent, thank you. If there's nothing further, we will profusely thank you for your report and your work on this matter. And we will note and file this, Mr. Clerk, and move on to the next item.
Item number 2 is Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority report relative to key findings of last point-in-time homeless count that serves as a census enumerating the number of people experiencing homelessness on a given night in the city.
Great. Sarah Mann, I'm the Director of Policy and Planning.
Josh DeSell, both with LASA.
Great. We will go through the information quickly. I know that the council members have heard about much of this data already, so I want to give you an update on where we are. We are continuing to do data analysis and do expect for more information at the community and city level to come out at the end of July. So I want to make sure that the committee is aware of that. So the 2017 homeless count results were released at the end of May. As you know, what we count people who meet HUD's definition of literal homelessness. So that's people who are both unsheltered and living in places not meant for human habitation, and people who are sheltered, living in motels that are paid for by government or charitable agencies, emergency shelters, and transitional housing. We count the Los Angeles Continuum of Care, which is the entire county with the exception of Pasadena, Glendale, and Long Beach. And we do the street count for 100% of the census tracts in the county. This year there were a few enhancements that we were able to make with a partnership with Metro, so we were able to count all of the Metro stations. We were able to get access to about a dozen county parks that we previously had not had access to be able to count. And we had enhanced access to riverbeds through partnership with Sheriff's Department and LAPD. So the results. At the county level, there was a 23% increase of people experiencing homelessness when compared to last year, about 58,000 people. At the city level, there was also an increase, slightly less, a 20% increase, about 34,000 people who were experiencing homelessness. Something that is interesting to note, difference between the city and the county. In the city, we saw a greater increase in sheltered population. There was a 26% increase in the sheltered population as opposed to an 18% increase in the unsheltered. And we do believe that that is a reflection of investments that the city made in shelter. In 2016, there were about 400 more beds that were created in the city. One of the significant reasons for the increase is really related to the increase in vehicles and encampments that we saw in really all geographic areas. There was a 21% increase compared to 2016 in the city of LA, and a 40% increase in people who were living in their cars. And we don't know for certain, but believe that that may be an indicator of people who are newly homeless, who have lost their housing and are now living in their cars and still have their cars. on the good news with placements, that's another thing we look at each year. At the same time, we're looking at the homeless count numbers. And there was a 14% increase in people who were placed into permanent housing. So there were 9,300 people in calendar year 2016 who were placed into permanent housing in the city, and about 14,000 people across the county. At the CD level, we saw increases in most of the council districts, with the exception of CD3, CD7, and CD12. The largest percentage increases were in CD1 and CD8, and the largest absolute increase in numbers of people were in CD14. For demographics, we did see an increase in the percentage of people who reported they were Latino. There was a more significant increase on the county side than in the city side in that demographic element. So we are going to be looking at that more closely to understand that trend. And as in years past, we saw a disproportionate amount of people who are Black or African American, and that continues to be a concern of LAHSA and of the LAHSA Commission. And in fact, at the last Commission meeting last week, the Commission discussed forming an ad hoc committee to look at this issue and better understand this demographic element and why that's happening. So for gender, we saw an increase in all, for all genders, but there was a more significant increase in males than females. There is the Commission had formed an ad hoc committee on women and homelessness to look at the increase that we've seen over the past several years in women who are experiencing homelessness and to better understand what the needs are of women who are experiencing homelessness. And that report will be finalized this summer and will be shared with the committee. So we're looking forward to being able to share the results of that committee's work. One thing that we changed this year in our approach is when we do our surveying and go out and ask people questions, we implemented a survey response card so that when we're asking sensitive questions with sensitive information, people have the option to give a nonverbal response. And so we believe that implementing this new response card did provide an opportunity for people to disclose information they may not have felt comfortable disclosing prior to that. So we did see a significant increase in the amount of people who reported having HIV or AIDS, and an 86% increase in the city. And we think that that really is a result of using this response card. There was a slight reduction in substance use disorder, which was interesting given the response card findings, and an increase in people reporting serious mental illness, but not at the same percent as the overall increase. So again, thinking that may be the people who are newly homeless. For chronic homelessness, so chronic homelessness are people who have been homeless for a year or longer, or have had 4 episodes of homelessness in the past 3 years, and have a disabling condition. So they're people who have some of our greatest needs. We saw a 19% increase in chronic homelessness in the city of LA. There were about 10,700 people who are experiencing chronic homelessness. Veterans, unlike in years past, where the numbers have gone down, this year we saw actually an increase in veterans experiencing homelessness, a 56% increase, about 2,500 veterans in the city of LA. The good news on this front is that over the past year and a half, we've been working really diligently with our service provider community and with the VA on creating a by name list of every veteran whom we know to be homeless, their name, who's working with them. So we have that list. That number actually really closely matches our point-in-time count number, so we can better understand why we're seeing this increase, and we'll be digging into that some more. For people and families, there were about 4,500 people and families who are experiencing homelessness. Really sort of one of the only bits of good news in the count this year was that we saw a decrease in unsheltered people and families. There was a 37% decrease. So that was good. We did on the inverse though see an increase in sheltered families. And one potential cause for that The state Calworks program had a change in its rules for a motel voucher program, where previously there was a limit on once per lifetime. And in the month of January, when we actually conducted the count, they changed that rule to be once a year. And so in that program, they saw a significant increase in families accessing motel vouchers in January. So we do believe that that's an impact. It may have, once people are accessing the motel voucher, they become homeless, where if they hadn't been in possibly we're staying with doubled up situation, they wouldn't have been considered homeless under the federal definition. For youth, this is an area where we did see an increase as well. There was a 43% increase in the city among youth homelessness. We used the same methodology that was designed and implemented last year. However, in this being our second year of using that methodology, our execution was much better. So it is challenging for us to know how much of the increase is due to just improved execution, but we do know that there was an impact there on that. Some other notable characteristics: about 75% of people who are unsheltered in the continuum have been in LA County for over 5 years. So the vast majority of people have been here for a long time. And also about 70% of people report that they actually became homeless in LA. So not that they became homeless somewhere else and then moved to LA, but they actually became homeless in LA.
Well, what percentage would you say that is of our
71% of our unsheltered population reported that they became homeless in Los Angeles County. We also ask if this is the person's first time experiencing homelessness, and 60% of the unsheltered population reported that this is their first time experiencing homelessness, about 22,000 of the individuals. Of those 22,000, 8,000 people said that they became homeless in the past year. So that's 8,000 individuals in an unsheltered situation who've been homeless for less than a year, and this is their very first time becoming homeless. So we'll be looking more at more demographic information to better understand this newly homeless population. Another question that we do believe that implementing the response card impacted was our ability to get information about lifetime experience with domestic violence or other forms of intimate partner violence. So we saw that number really double in this year, again, because we believe that that's because of the response card. So there was about 11,000 people who reported that they had a history of domestic or intimate partner violence. It was interesting, we did see last year there was about 13% of the men reported a history with that, and this year there was a 27% increase. Again, we believe the response card having a factor in that. So about 27% of the men have a history, 50% of the women, and 68% of the transgender population. So really, it's important that we ensure that services are trauma-informed to support people. We did ask a new question this year to understand if people were currently fleeing violence, and 10% of the unsheltered population reported that they were currently fleeing violence. Another new question that we asked this year was sex trafficking, and 6% of men reported experience with sex trafficking, 28% of females, and 42% of the transgender population. So this is something that we'll, again, also be looking more closely at. And next year we plan on asking a question about labor trafficking. That's some of the feedback that we've gotten from the community to be looking at that as well. So those are some of the highlights of this year's homeless count, and happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you all so much. Mr. Price?
Just kind of curious on the increase in families. I think it was about 25% from last year. Are we counting it better now, or just more people out on the streets now, or what are we doing?
Yeah, so I think we do count better, and that year over year you make improvements, but this does reflect an increase in people who are experiencing homelessness. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I can add that actually this year we did survey, as part of our demographic survey, more families than we have ever before. So in terms of understanding the living situations of families experiencing homelessness, particularly unsheltered families, we have better data than we have had in any past counts around that population. Also, just noting what was pointed out earlier regarding the Calworks temporary homeless assistance Motel Voucher program. So month over month, I think in December of 16, there were about 600 families enrolled in that program. Then in January of 17, there were nearly 2,000 families that enrolled in that program. So that also, we assume that contributes to some degree to what we saw in the family population this year, particularly with the larger increase in the sheltered population. But there's no way for us to disaggregate or to know which families would not have been homeless if they had not been able to apply for that assistance again.
And then the other category that caught my interest was the 18 to 24. Again, another kind of big spike, and you know that youth has been a real, need to be a real focus, more of a focus. What are we doing there? What's the cause? Any thoughts?
So again, as Sarah said, the execution of the youth count was much better than it had been in years past. So this year we actually did. So it's a survey-based count, which means that we sample census tracts randomly in 3 different sort of levels of probability of youth being in those census tracts. And we sampled more tracts this year, and the planning effort around that is really involved in talking to service providers that outreach to youth, that work with young people experiencing homelessness, and figuring out where they are to inform our approach to planning the survey effort. We conducted those hotspot planning sessions really much closer to the count in the 2 weeks before the count, which was much closer to the point in time count in the survey effort this year as it was compared to last year, and so we assume that we did a much better job of identifying where that population may be. Again, because we enhanced the methodology this year, there's no way for us to tell what portion of the increase can be attributed to the enhanced planning effort and execution as opposed to actual increase, though we assume that there's definitely an increase factored into that.
Well, everyone's to be congratulated. It was a real Herculean effort. And of course, this data is so valuable if we're going to really be able to allocate resources where they're needed. And I know there were thousands of volunteers that were involved, and so it's, I think, increasing awareness that we all have something to do, role to play. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bonin?
Not a lot. I've gotten, unlike my usual line of questioning, not a lot. I've gotten a couple different briefings on this. So Mr. Price asked about one of them. I mean, the 2 things that struck out at me for this first glance was the increase in families and the increase in veterans. And what struck me on both of those is that, if I'm not mistaken, those were downward trajectories last year. So first question is about the families. I'm thrilled to see that we have such a high percentage of sheltered homeless families. If they have to be homeless, having them sheltered is certainly preferable. And the Calworks thing, I understand, was key to that. But did something change in somewhere that caused a change in the downward trajectory to the upward trajectory?
I mean, we saw an increase overall in the total population, and I mean, we're certainly looking at this more closely. But the cost of housing has gone up, and wages haven't kept pace, and so and all of that data.
But that didn't. Yeah, that didn't switch over the past year. I'm trying to see if there's anything we can look at, because I come to the conclusion that either these numbers are just so screwy, no matter how hard it is to gather them, that it's not sort of reliable year to year, or that something changed. Now, on and I haven't had anybody give me an explanation about what might have changed with families. They've given me a reason for why we might be sheltering more of them, which is great. For veterans, I asked the same question, and it just seemed completely illogical to me, given that we're doing so well with housing veterans over a period of years in Los Angeles. The one thing I'd heard anecdotally from a couple of service providers, and I want to know if this is true from your perspective or if you have any other potential reasons for why it went from like that, is that over the past year, the VA ended a bunch of its contracts with local service providers, and therefore their outreach was significantly hampered because a lot of, I mean, I'm hearing this from service providers, but they say that folks have a better level of trust with the service providers than with the big bad VA.
We actually asked the VA that same question, and what the VA informed us is that while they reduced the number of contractors, they kept the same number of veterans who were being served. So they sort of shuffled around within their contract portfolio. So I don't know the exact numbers, but if there were 3,000 veterans that were being served under 12 contracts, there's still 3,000 veterans being served, but now under 5 contracts.
Yeah, but if people have a level of trust and history with a CBO from their neighborhood that they see versus an agency that swoops in that doesn't have a particularly good reputation with vets, I can see why having the same number of contacts would result in less success.
Yeah. So we have similar questions, and I think the VA does as well. And so we're hoping that really by using the by name list to track as people are becoming homeless and understanding why that is, that we'll be able to have a better understanding how many of these veterans are really newly homeless and have never experienced homelessness before versus those that may have been previously homeless housed and then are reentering the system.
Thank you.
I can also add that we're in the process of negotiating data sharing agreements with both the city and county housing authorities so that we can get monthly updates on voucher utilization across the board, vouchers that are dedicated to people experiencing homelessness, but in particular VASH, and really understand what the turnover rate looks like and the retention rate with that resource.
And I will say, I think the question around, and I mean, Josh was explaining it with the Calworks program, there really is a question of how many of those families, had that rule change not happened, how many of those would have met the definition of literal homelessness. So there was about 1,000 more families counted in that program this year as opposed to last year. And so if families had been staying, in a doubled up situation or staying, sleeping on someone's couch, they would not have met the federal definition. And once the rule change took place and they were able to access the motel voucher, that would have, made people become homeless. So it's difficult for us to know what that number really is and to understand it, but we know that there is some level of impact there.
Thank you, Mr. Bonin. Real quickly, thank you all for your work. Every time we get a report, we hear a little bit more. So I actually had 2 questions. One, just in broad strokes, what are the sort of main things that you're continuing to look into that we can expect to hear more about in the relatively near future? And then second, this is a theoretical question. I guess I'm asking you to make a guess. I guess I'm just realizing as I'm listening to your report, the better our services and outreach get, the more people we're going to count. So we shouldn't be telling people the counts are going to go down. So for instance, if we get all these parking lots, those people now are going to be counted for sure, where before now they were maybe counted, right? And we put 100 outreach workers on the street, presumably we're going to be able to capture more of the population that's actually homeless than we are now. So we may expect to get higher counts just as a result of our activity and investment.
I'll start with your second question. Okay. So in terms of the methodology for enumerating the adult population, what everybody thinks of when they think of the homeless count, boots on the ground, 3 nights in January, that hasn't really changed, and an increase in service offerings isn't going to change that.
Oh, really?
Okay. Yeah. So it's really the youth count, which is a survey-based count, where the the better we're doing at identifying where young people might be, that might
But let me just stop you. The boots on the ground, if people are in a shelter, those people get counted.
They'll definitely be.
So if there's
if
there's a new shelter, there's
But
more counting, right?
We do, but that's where the 8,000 volunteers come in, and they fan out across the entire city and count people in the alleyways and, in the streets. So there's the shelter count, which is one component, but with the unsheltered count, that's where we have 100% of census tracts that are covered through volunteers. And that we were able to achieve that last year and maintain it this year.
But you miss a lot. I mean, he's right. Just like with the vehicle count,
yeah,
I've done it. You're guessing. Does that look like somebody lives in it or not?
Whereas if somebody's in a parking lot, you know for sure, and you actually will know how many there are, right? Because it's two things about the vehicles. One, it's a vehicle. Is someone in it? How many people are in it? How long? Did they move, a week ago? I mean, because, homeless people in most parts of the city don't want to be seen. So they get in places where you're not going to see them. And then in broad strokes, the categories or the points of information that you're looking into that we should expect to hear back from.
So I can speak to some of those. So obviously Sarah mentioned as we're going through the presentation some of the research questions that we want to take on and analyzing the raw data in the wake of the larger count report effort. Over the month of July, we plan to be releasing subpopulation level data summaries. So I'm sure that each of you have seen the data summaries that were produced by council district. So we'll be producing those for the entire continuum of care, but for subpopulations like veterans, families, people experiencing chronic homelessness. In addition, we will also be releasing similar tools on our website to be able to look at the population counts by opt-in community, so really community level information. We also this year did oversampling in 3 key communities to better understand the populations experiencing homelessness there, really high density areas in those 3 communities were Skid Row, Hollywood, and Venice. And so we will be able to produce, because of the oversampling in those jurisdictions, we'll be able to produce data summaries providing a high level of reliability in the estimates of the demography of the population in those areas.
And I would just add, from a research perspective, I mean, we're really interested in looking more at the newly homeless population and better understanding those demographics and why people are becoming homeless. And then, with the Commission's focus on African American population and overrepresentation in the homeless population, we plan on doing more analysis on that data.
Perfect. Go ahead. Yes, sir, Mr. Price.
Coupled with that, there was a sharp increase in Latino
Correct.
Population. And again, just better counting or change circumstances, or what's?
We want to better understand that. There's still population-wise, there's still underrepresentation of Latinos in the homeless population as compared to the general population. It may be an indicator of new people becoming homeless and the housing market conditions. So that's something that we want to be looking at as well.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. We appreciate your reports, and staff will continue to work with you all to see when it makes sense to come back and get some more things on the record and as a part of our discussion. So thank you all for that. Mr. Clerk, before we go, I have one public comment card from Mr. Greenlee, who's been waiting patiently.
Just for clarification, Mr. Chair, for this particular item, is it the intent of the committee to note and file?
Yes, sir. You're on.
Yes. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity. I will be very brief, I promise. 6 things. One is, thanks so much for having this hearing. The second thing is, like everybody else said, we are totally on board. I'm Alan Greenlee with the Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing, by the way. We're totally on board with the idea of providing good jobs and building this housing, and absolutely committed to making this happen. One of the things that struck me in the discussion today, associated, and in my discussions, that we are not talking to each other with respect to orders of magnitude. Mr. Miller talked about $40 billion with MTA and $20 billion with LAUSD, 1,100 workers on the Wilshire Grant. We have $1.2 billion that will be spread over 120 projects over the next decade. And we will hire about 1,000 people this year with what you guys have approved. And so I'm not sure that those orders of magnitudes marry the way they could. And so having a deliberate discussion about how we can make a program work, I think is really important. So appreciate your help. The notion of 75 units is important because when we had a PLA on the CRA, you could get $10 million from the low-income housing tax credit to help fund your deal. Today, you can get $5 million. So we're doing more with less. So the budgets are tighter. And that has a particular impact on how we do our work right now. And then just the very last thing I'll say is that would encourage that you guys consider making an exemption for facilities deals just because they're small and thin and not a ton of work there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other business, Mr. Clerk?
The desk is clear, sir.
Excellent. We're adjourned.